What's up guys, in this video we're gonna take a look at a Voodoo 2. A few months ago I uploaded a video of the Voodoo 1 with the Pentium MMX. In that video a viewer asked if we would get any benefit upgrading it from a Voodoo 1 to a Voodoo 2. Frankly, I'm not sure. So today we're gonna get that system, a Pentium MMX with a Trident 9682D card, 64 megabytes of SDRAM, a Sound Blaster AWE64, and an SD to IDE adapter, and we're going to pair that with the Voodoo 2 and see how it performs in games from its time period. The Voodoo 2 was a follow-up to the legendary Voodoo Graphics PCI, the first consumer 3D accelerator from 3DFX, a video card that revolutionized PC gaming, so that's a lot to follow. Both of these video cards were exclusively for 3D, meaning that you need a primary video card for 2D games and your OS, while the 3D card takes over when it's called by a low-level 3D API like Glide, OpenGL, or DirectX. There are others, but those are the main ones. While the Voodoo 1 was released in October of 1996, the Voodoo 2 was released in March of 1998. I remember seeing it at my friend's house while he played Tomb Raider using Glide, 3DFX's proprietary 3D API, and I was baffled. At this time, 3DFX used AIBs to fabricate the video cards, and my first ever 3D accelerator was a Voodoo 2 made by Diamond. They chose to name it the Monster 3D 2. As my original Voodoo 2 is long gone, the card we're taking a look at today was made by Creative Labs. This one is called the 3D Blaster Voodoo 2. These cards used to come in bundles with games and other applications, but of course I only managed to get a loose card and thankfully the pass-through cable. And with current prices and scarcity, I was very fortunate to get that much. Now to look at the specs, like the Voodoo 1, the Voodoo 2 has one render output unit and one pixel shader, but with two texture mapping units it has twice as many as the Voodoo 1. The GPU and memory clock both run at 90 MHz and it has a 192-bit bus memory interface. It supports DirectX 6 and OpenGL 1.1. This video card has 8 MB of EDO RAM, twice as much as the Voodoo 1, but it also came in 12 MB. All games in the Voodoo 1 ran at 640 by 480, mostly because of the limited 4 MB of video memory. So the first difference here is that we're running all games in 800 by 600. And speaking of that, the capture card didn't go well with the 800 by 600 signal from the Voodoo 2, so we're going to be looking at the CRT monitor. Unreal is quite smooth at 800 by 600, not the best frame rate ever at an average of 25 FPS, but probably something I would be willing to put up with back then. The bump in resolution allows you to see more details. The ship and the waterfall look great, just as they should. HalfLife was a tough one that is probably being limited by the 166 MHz CPU. FPS stayed mostly between 10 and 20 for a not so great gaming experience. The game does look really good at 800 by 600 and reducing the resolution to 640 by 480 doesn't accomplish much. So this is a game we're going to have to try with a faster CPU in the future. Heretic 2 runs well. The game is based on the Quake I engine, so it poses an easier challenge for the system. Although the game is smooth, there's no way to see FPS as there's no inbuilt counter, and it runs on Glide, so Fraps doesn't work. But it feels pretty smooth. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. How's that? Quake 2 runs very well with lows of 25 FPS, but staying most of the time above 30 FPS for a pretty good gaming experience. This is no surprise as Quake 2 is very well optimized and it's a title released in the same year as the Pentium 166 MMX, what should make it a good fit for the system with the Voodoo 2. Tomb Raider 2 is a title I wanted to include because this was the game that I first saw running with a Voodoo 2 card in person, and what basically made me a 3DFX fan at the time. The game isn't really fast paced, it doesn't require a high frame rate. Overall, it feels solid. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. And here's a game the Voodoo 2 and the Pentium MMX 166 have no business running. This is Return to Castle Wolfenstein from 2001. I was shocked that this actually ran. Now this one is in 640 by 480 and in the minimum graphical settings possible. Although it's mostly unplayable, it worked, and that is already more than what I expected. As usual, there's a bunch of you that are going to be thinking, why didn't I pair this with a more powerful CPU? Rest assured, this is not its final place. I got the perfect PC for this video card and it'll be coming up in a video soon. While we don't get to that video, why don't you take a look at this one that featured the Pentium MMX and the Voodoo one.